I'm Cooper, 26 now. But at 17, my world revolved around technology and my dream of owning a custom gaming PC. For 14 months, I worked 3 jobs, saved every penny, sacrificed every social event. Then one day I came home to find my packages missing, and my sister Julia flaunting new designer clothes. My dad had sold my computer parts to fund her school trip to France. That betrayal changed everything, setting me on a path that would not only transform my life, but eventually tear apart the facade my family had carefully built. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button, and stick around to see how I rebuilt my life after the ultimate family betrayal. I grew up in a seemingly normal middle-class neighborhood in Boston. Our house wasn't the biggest on the block, but it was comfortable with 4 bedrooms and a decent backyard. My earliest memories are pretty standard: riding bikes with neighborhood kids, weekend barbecues, and family game nights that gradually became less frequent as I got older. My fascination with computers started when I was 7. My elementary school had just received a donation of new computers, and from the moment I sat down in front of one, I was hooked. While other kids wanted to be astronauts or firefighters, I dreamed of creating software and building machines. I would spend hours in the school computer lab during lunch breaks, learning basic programming and how computers worked. The unequal treatment between me and my sister Julia began subtly. Julia was 3 years younger than me, with the same dark hair but blessed with my mother's blue eyes, instead of my father's brown ones. From the beginning, she was Daddy's little princess. I didn't notice it much at first. It seemed normal that a little girl would get more attention. But as we grew older, the differences became impossible to ignore. My father, Richard, worked as a manager at a large corporation. He wasn't particularly tall, but he carried himself with an air of importance that made him seem larger. He had a booming laugh that filled the house when Julia said something amusing. But when I tried to share my accomplishments in technology classes, his eyes would glaze over with disinterest. "That's nice, Cooper," he'd say before changing the subject. My mother, Diane, was kind but conflict avoidant to a fault. She worked part-time as a receptionist at a dental office, spending the rest of her time managing our home and increasingly catering to Julia's growing list of demands. Whenever I would bring up the obvious favoritism, she would pat my hand and say, "Your father just connects with Julia differently. He loves you too in his own way." But she never actually confronted him about it. The gift disparity was the first concrete evidence of the favoritism. On my 10th birthday, I received a practical set of clothes and a science book. 2 months later, Julia turned 7 and got a lavish party at an entertainment center, complete with a custom cake, professional entertainment, and a new tablet. When I pointed out the difference, my father said, "Julia is more social. She needs these experiences." As if I didn't. By the time I was 12, I had already started mowing lawns and doing odd jobs around the neighborhood. Not because my family couldn't afford things, but because I quickly learned that if I wanted something, I needed to earn it myself. My parents praised my independence and work ethic, but in reality, they had forced these traits upon me by making it clear my wants were secondary. Julia never had to work for anything. By age 12, she was demanding designer clothes and expensive makeup. My parents would debate it briefly, but inevitably give in. "It's important for girls to fit in," my mother would explain, as if I didn't also face social pressures. Julia quickly learned that tears, or the silent treatment, would eventually get her what she wanted. The contrast between us grew more pronounced. I was practical, saving money and planning purchases carefully. Julia was impulsive, wanting things immediately, and losing interest just as quickly. Our rooms told the story clearly. Mine was organized with second-hand furniture, but well-maintained, while hers was chaotic, littered with barely used expensive items. High school brought new dimensions to the inequality. I got a job at Tech World, a local electronics store, working after school and weekends. My manager, Mr. Peterson, became more of a mentor to me than my own father ever was. He recognized my passion and knowledge, often letting me advise customers on computer specifications and troubleshooting. Meanwhile, my dream of becoming a software developer grew stronger. I knew I needed a proper high-performance computer to learn advanced programming and game development. The machines at school were adequate for basics, but nothing that could handle serious development work or the latest software. As my determination to save for a PC grew, so did Julia's expectations. She now wanted international trips, professional photo shoots for social media, and weekly shopping sprees. My parents' credit card bills must have been astronomical, but they never said no to her. They even started talking about buying her a car when she turned 16, 2 years before I would be able to afford my own. My best friend Mike was the only person who truly understood my frustration. He shared my interest in technology and came from a family that treated their children equally. "Your parents are creating a monster," he would say about Julia, "and they're not doing you any favors either." He was right on both counts. The first major family blow-up happened when I accidentally discovered that my parents had dipped into my college fund to pay for Julia's sweet 16 party. They had rented a hotel ballroom, hired a DJ, ordered custom decorations, and invited 60 of her closest friends. The total came to over $5,000, money that had been set aside for my education. When I confronted them, my father's response still burns in my memory. "You'll probably get scholarships anyway. And you can always take out loans like normal people. This was important to your sister's social development." My mother just looked away, unwilling to contradict him. That night, I made a promise to myself that I would find a way to become completely independent from them as soon as possible. After the college fund incident, I knew I couldn't count on my parents for my future. If I wanted that high-end PC, I needed a foolproof plan to save the money myself. I calculated that I would need about $2,800 for the setup. I wanted a powerful processor, top-tier graphics card, ample RAM, solid-state drive, high-resolution monitor, and quality peripherals. I mapped out a financial strategy that would have impressed any economist. My morning paper route brought in $80 a week. The electronics store job paid just above minimum wage, adding another $160 for weekend shifts. During spring and summer, I added lawn care services, earning anywhere from $50 to $100 extra depending on the week. Every expense was carefully evaluated. I brought lunch from home instead of buying food with coworkers. When friends invited me to movies or restaurants, I usually declined, making up excuses rather than admitting I was saving every penny. The few times I did join them, I ordered the cheapest menu items and drank water. I kept a small notebook where I tracked every dollar earned and spent. The growing number gave me a sense of accomplishment that balanced the social sacrifices. Each entry represented progress toward independence, something I craved more with each passing day in that house. The technical planning was just as detailed as the financial. I created spreadsheets comparing different components, tracking price fluctuations, and calculating performance benchmarks. I spent hours on tech forums researching compatibility issues and optimal configurations. This wasn't just about buying a computer, it was about crafting the perfect tool for my future. Mr. Peterson became an invaluable mentor during this time. He'd been building custom PCs since the early 90s and had witnessed the entire evolution of personal computing. "Most people buy more than they need or less than they should," he told me. "The trick is understanding exactly what you're going to use it for and building accordingly." He would stay after closing, sometimes sketching diagrams of motherboard layouts and explaining the nuances of power supply ratings. I absorbed knowledge from every available source. YouTube tutorials became my evening entertainment. I joined online communities dedicated to PC building, asking questions and gradually beginning to answer others' queries as my knowledge grew. The planning phase became almost as engrossing as I imagined the building process would be. The day I hit $1,000 saved was momentous. I treated myself to a fast food meal, the only celebration I could justify. Looking at my bank balance online, I felt a surge of pride that almost compensated for the emptiness at home. I was making this happen, despite my family, not because of them. Predictably, my parents took issue with my dedication to saving. "You're working too many hours," my mother complained. "Your grades will suffer." They were fine, actually. I maintained a 3.8 GPA despite my work schedule. "You need to have a social life," my father added, apparently forgetting that Julia's social life was funded by my college savings. The irony was lost on them. Their lack of understanding only strengthened my resolve. Each dismissive comment about my computer obsession pushed me to work harder. If they wouldn't support my passion, I would make it happen anyway. Meanwhile, Julia's spending continued unabated. That spring, she went on a shopping spree that resulted in bags from 6 different designer stores. When I mentioned the extravagance, my father defended it. "She's representing the family when she's out with her friends. Appearance matters," as if I wasn't also part of the family when I wore the same 3 shirts in rotation. The most galling disparity came when Julia turned 16. As promised, my parents bought her a new compact SUV. Not luxury, but certainly not cheap. The monthly payments were casually mentioned at dinner, as if they were discussing the water bill. I was still taking the bus to work, or getting rides from Mike. When I asked about potentially getting help with a car when I turned 18, my father looked surprised. "We assumed you'd buy your own since you're so independent with everything else." After 14 months of disciplined saving, I finally reached my goal. $2,817 sat in my account. Enough for everything on my carefully curated list, with a small buffer for shipping or price changes. The feeling was indescribable. Despite every obstacle, despite the lack of support or encouragement, I had done it through sheer determination. I still remember the evening I placed the orders. It was a Friday in April, just after finishing my shift at Tech World. I sat at the store's demonstration laptop after closing Mr. Tech, Peterson looking over my shoulder supportively as I navigated to different websites, comparing final prices and shipping times. With each confirmation email that arrived, my excitement grew. The components would arrive over the next week, and I would finally have the tool I needed to pursue my passion for programming and game development. "I'm proud of you, kid," Mr. Peterson said as I finalized the last order. "Not many adults have the discipline you've shown." His approval meant more than my father's ever had. As I walked home that evening, I felt lighter than I had in years. Something was finally going right. The week after placing my orders was filled with anticipation. I checked the tracking information compulsively between classes and during breaks at work. According to the shipping updates, the first packages, the case and power supply, would arrive Tuesday while I was at school. The motherboard and CPU were scheduled for Wednesday, with the graphics card, RAM, and storage drives coming Thursday. The monitor and peripherals would complete the delivery on Friday. I cleared a space in my room for the unboxing, setting up a static-free workspace with the tools I'd need for assembly. I'd watched enough build videos to know proper anti-static precautions were essential. I even created a checklist for the build process, breaking it down into stages for efficient assembly. Tuesday arrived, and I rushed home from school, eager to see the first components of my dream build. But when I got to the house, there were no packages by the door or in the mailbox. I checked the tracking again. They had been delivered at 11:23 that morning. Confused, I looked in the garage and living room before asking my mother. "Packages. I haven't seen any packages," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. There was something in her voice, a hesitation that immediately triggered alarm bells. Before I could press further, my father came home from work. "Dad, did you see any computer parts packages delivered today? The tracking says they arrived, but I can't find them." He exchanged a look with my mother that confirmed my growing suspicion that something was very wrong. "We need to talk, Cooper," he said, using his manager voice, the one he used when he was about to justify something unreasonable. Before he could continue, Julia burst through the front door, radiating excitement. She was carrying shopping bags from high-end stores and wearing a brand new designer handbag I'd never seen before. "Look what Daddy got me for my France trip," she exclaimed to my mother, completely ignoring my presence. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "What did you do?" I asked my father. My voice barely above a whisper. After some evasion and minimizing the truth emerged. My father had intercepted my packages and returned them to the sellers, claiming they were ordered by mistake. The money had been refunded to my bank account, which as a minor my parents still had access to. That money had then been transferred to their account to help pay for Julia's upcoming school trip to France and her necessary new wardrobe for the journey. "You had no right," I shouted, losing composure entirely. "That was my money. I worked for 14 months to save that." "Don't raise your voice in my house," my father countered. "Julia needed this trip for her college applications. It's an educational experience. Your computer games could wait." "They weren't games. It was for programming. For my future." The distinction was lost on him as always. In his mind, anything involving computers that wasn't immediately profit-generating was playing. My mother tried to mediate as usual, offering too little too late. "Cooper, we were going to tell you. We'll pay you back eventually." Julia's opportunity came up suddenly, and the deposits were due. When I demanded, "When exactly were you planning to pay me back? And with what money? When you're already buying her a new outfit every week and making car payments?" Neither had a concrete answer, just vague assurances about when things settled down financially. I'd heard those promises before. Julia, rather than showing any remorse, actually rolled her eyes. "It's not like you don't have a computer at school. You're being dramatic about your little obsession with computer games. This trip will actually help my future." I checked my bank account on my phone and felt physically ill. The refunds had indeed been processed, totaling $2,640, but the balance now showed just $73. They had taken everything. The second confrontation was even worse than the first. My father became defensive. My mother tearful, both insisting they had the legal right to borrow money from my account since I was underage. They promised to replace it soon, but couldn't give a timeline or plan for doing so. "This isn't borrowing," I said, my voice now eerily calm as shock set in. "It's stealing. From your own son." "Don't be so selfish," my father snapped. "Family helps family. Julia needed this more than you needed computer toys." Julia didn't even pretend to be apologetic. "The trip is only $3,000 and Daddy says that's a bargain for international travel. Your computer stuff was almost that much just to play games in your room alone. That's kind of pathetic, Cooper." I looked at my family, really looked at them, and something broke inside me. These people were not on my side. They never had been. My needs, my dreams, my hard work meant nothing compared to Julia's whims. That night was the lowest point of my life to that point. I lay in bed, alternating between rage and despair. Years of saving, planning, and sacrifice had been erased in an instant, without even the courtesy of a discussion. Worse was the realization that they didn't see anything wrong with what they'd done. In their minds, my resources were family resources, while Julia's wants were sacrosanct. Around midnight, I texted Mike. They took it all, returned the parts, and emptied my account. He came over first thing the next morning before school, bringing coffee and a sympathetic ear. Unlike my family, he understood exactly what had been stolen from me, not just money, but dignity and autonomy. "You can't stay here," he said finally. "They'll never change. You need to get out as soon as you can." As I sat in classes that day, barely hearing the teachers, a cold certainty settled over me. Mike was right. This house wasn't a home, and these people weren't acting like family. If I stayed, this pattern would continue indefinitely. I needed an exit strategy. For the next week, I barely spoke to my family. I went through the motions. Attending school, going to work, coming home for meals. But emotionally, I had withdrawn completely. I responded to direct questions with one-word answers and avoided being in the same room with them whenever possible. My parents initially seemed concerned about my silence, but that quickly gave way to irritation. "You can't sulk forever," my father said over dinner 3 days after the incident. "Life is full of disappointments. Learn to deal with them." My mother tried a gentler approach, offering to make my favorite meal, as if food could compensate for their betrayal. Julia was the worst. Rather than showing any remorse, she seemed to enjoy my pain. She deliberately talked about her upcoming France trip at every opportunity, describing the shopping she'd done and the places she'd visit. She even had the audacity to ask if I wanted her to bring me back a souvenir. "Maybe a keychain for your future computer," she said with a smirk. While they thought I was simply brooding, I was actually formulating a plan. During a shift at Tech World, I confided the full story to Mr. Peterson. His normally jovial face darkened as I explained what had happened. "That's not right, Cooper. Not by any measure," he said when I finished. Then he made an offer that would change everything I've been thinking about. "Hiring a full-time assistant manager after you graduate. The job's yours if you want it. It would be enough to get your own place and start building your life." That night, I created a detailed exit strategy. I would need to secure my own bank account without parental access, find affordable housing, and gather all my essential documents. I made a timeline counting down to graduation just 2 months away. Until then, I would need to play along just enough to avoid raising suspicions. The next day, I visited a different bank during my lunch break and opened a new account using my school ID. I arranged for my Tech World paychecks to be direct deposited there going forward. The paper route money was still paid in cash, which I now kept hidden in a hollowed-out book rather than depositing. One afternoon, when my parents were at work and Julia at a friend's house, I searched my father's home office for my birth certificate and social security card. While looking through his filing cabinet, I stumbled across something unexpected: credit card statements showing balances in the tens of thousands of dollars. Further digging revealed bank statements, indicating they had taken out a second mortgage on the house the previous year. Most shocking was a folder labeled Cooper, College. Inside was documentation of the education account they had established when I was born, and a history of withdrawals that had accelerated in the past 2 years. The most recent statement showed a balance of just $712 down from nearly $20,000. Next to it was a folder labeled Julia, College, with a healthy balance of $15,000. I photographed everything with my phone, creating digital evidence of their financial decisions. I wasn't sure how I would use this information yet, but something told me it might be important later. Armed with this knowledge, I began to understand the family dynamic even better. My parents weren't just favoring Julia out of preference. They were financially overextended from indulging her and using my resources to maintain the illusion that they could afford her lifestyle. They were living on credit cards and loans while stealing from my future to fund hers. I calculated that if I worked full-time at Tech World after graduation and found a roommate situation, I could afford basic living expenses and community college courses in the evening. It wouldn't be the university experience I had once hoped for, but it would be mine earned honestly. Mr. Peterson helped me refine my budget, offering advice on affordable neighborhoods and introducing me to a former employee who was looking for a roommate. "Alex is a good kid. Works in IT support now. You two would get along, both being tech heads." As graduation approached, I went through the motions at home, saying just enough to avoid confrontations but volunteering nothing about my plans. I retrieved my important documents, gradually secured my new bank account information, and researched tenant rights, in case my parents tried to force me to stay. The calm that came with having a concrete plan was surprising. The hurt remained, but it was overshadowed by a sense of purpose and the first stirrings of genuine independence. For perhaps the first time, I was taking control of my life rather than reacting to my family's decisions. I occasionally caught my mother watching me with a puzzled expression, as if trying to decipher my new demeanor. My father, typically oblivious, seemed to think my attitude problem had resolved itself since I was functioning normally again. Julia remained self-absorbed, entirely focused on her upcoming trip. The final piece fell into place when I received $300 in graduation gifts from extended family members. Money I immediately stored in my secret location rather than depositing in my compromised account. Combined with my savings from the past 2 months of working, I had nearly $2,000 hidden away, enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on a shared apartment. The night before graduation, I packed a small bag with essentials and stored it in the back of my closet. Tomorrow would mark both an ending and a beginning. As I fell asleep, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months' hope. Graduation day arrived bright and clear. I donned the blue cap and gown, attached the Honor Society cords I'd earned despite my heavy work schedule, and prepared to close this chapter of my life. The ceremony itself was a blur of speeches about bright futures and unlimited potential. Ironies not lost on me, given my circumstances. My parents attended, of course, maintaining the appearance of the proud, supportive family. They took the obligatory photos and made appropriate comments to the parents of my classmates. Julia came too, though. She spent most of the ceremony texting her friends and asking repeatedly how much longer it would be. Afterward, when my name was announced as graduating with honors, the applause from my section was enthusiastic. Mostly friends like Mike, who knew how hard I'd worked while balancing multiple jobs. My parents clapped politely, but seemed more interested in when we could leave for the restaurant where they'd made lunch reservations. They had given me a card containing $100 and a generic "Congratulations, graduate" message, a stark contrast to the expensive watch they had already purchased for Julia's graduation 2 years in the future. During lunch, my father made a point of mentioning that with graduation complete, I should start looking at apartments, since they couldn't be expected to support an adult indefinitely. The irony of his statement, when they had been financially draining me rather than supporting me, was almost laughable. Little did they know, I had already secured an apartment, with Alex having signed the lease the previous week. Mr. Peterson had vouched for my employment stability, and first month's rent plus security deposit had been paid from my secret savings. The final straw came that evening. I overheard my parents in their bedroom discussing finances. My mother mentioned that my grandparents and aunts had sent checks totaling nearly $500 for my graduation. "We should put that toward Julia's summer language camp," my father said. "Cooper doesn't really need it with his job, and this would look good on her college applications. Shouldn't we at least ask him?" My mother ventured. "Why?" "So he can be difficult about it. He's working full-time now. Julia's future is the priority right now." That conversation cemented my decision. After they went to bed, I spent hours writing a detailed letter, explaining exactly why I was leaving and documenting the pattern of financial exploitation that had culminated in the computer incident. I included copies of the photos I'd taken of their financial documents, particularly the college account withdrawals. The letter wasn't angry so much as it was factual, a clinical documentation of years of unequal treatment and the final betrayal that had broken my trust completely. I slept little that night and rose before the rest of the family. I placed the letter on the kitchen table, then brought my pre-packed bag downstairs. I had arranged for Mike to help me move the rest of my important belongings later, once I'd had the initial conversation with my parents. My mother came downstairs, first stopping short when she saw me sitting at the table with my bag. "Cooper, what's this?" "I'm moving out today," I said calmly. "I've found an apartment with a roommate." The letter explains everything. She began reading, her face growing paler with each paragraph. By the time my father came downstairs, she was crying silently. "What's going on?" he demanded, then saw the letter. As he read, his expression cycled through confusion, anger, and finally a defensive indignation. "This is ridiculous. You're twisting everything to make us look bad." "The bank statements don't lie, Dad. Neither do the credit card bills or the empty college account with my name on it. You went through my private papers. How dare you? How dare I? How dare you steal from me? How dare you take money I worked for and give it to Julia? How dare you empty an account meant for my education?" The shouting brought Julia downstairs, still in her pajamas. She grabbed the letter and skimmed it, her face contorting with anger. "You're such a drama queen, Cooper. So Mom and Dad help me more. Maybe they just love me more. Did you ever think of that?" Her words hung in the air, shocking even our parents into silence. In that moment of raw honesty, the family dynamic was laid completely bare. "You're right about one thing," I said finally. "They do love you more. They've proven that with every decision they've made. But that's their failure, not mine. And I don't have to stick around for it anymore." My father attempted to reassert control. "If you walk out that door, don't expect any support from us. No help with college, no place to come back to if you fail." I actually laughed. "What help with college? You already spent that money on Julia. And this hasn't been a home to me for years. It's just the place where I watched you give her everything while telling me to work harder." My mother made a last attempt to salvage the situation. "Cooper, please, we can work this out. We made mistakes, but we're still family. Family doesn't steal from each other, Mom. Family doesn't consistently put one child's wants above another child's needs. You didn't just make mistakes. You made choices over and over again that showed me exactly where I stood." I picked up my bag and walked toward the door. My father called after me. "This is disrespectful after everything we've done for you." Without turning around, I replied, "Everything you've done? Like what?" "Teaching me that I can't count on my family. Showing me that hard work means nothing if Julia wants something. Thanks for those lessons, Dad. They're the only inheritance I'm likely to get from you." And with that, I walked out, closing the door on that chapter of my life. Mike was waiting in his car at the end of the block, ready to help me move forward into whatever came next. That first night in the new apartment was a strange mix of emotions. Alex had already furnished the common areas, so the place didn't feel completely bare. But my bedroom contained only a second-hand mattress on the floor, a lamp, and the few boxes of possessions Mike had helped me move. Sitting there alone after he left, I felt a wave of fear wash over me. Had I made a mistake? Could I really make it on my own at 18? But beneath the fear was something else, an exhilarating sense of freedom. For the first time, I was completely in control of my own life. No one would take my money, dismiss my goals, or compare me unfavorably to anyone else. Whatever I built from here would be entirely mine. True to his word, Mr. Peterson increased my hours to full-time and bumped my pay to reflect my new assistant manager position. The schedule was arranged to give me evenings free 3 days a week for community college courses, which I registered for the following week. The employee discount at Tech World became even more valuable as I slowly began acquiring components for a new PC build, not all at once this time, but piece by piece as my budget allowed. My mother began texting me about a week after I left. The messages followed a predictable pattern: initial concern about my welfare, followed by pleas to talk things out, ending with subtle guilt trips about how my departure was breaking the family apart and hurting Julia. I responded briefly to confirm I was safe, but maintained firm boundaries about not discussing a return. My father and Julia maintained radio silence, which suited me fine. According to my mother's texts, my father was too hurt by my accusations to reach out, and Julia was busy preparing for her France trip. Reading between the lines, I gathered that my departure had created practical problems. There was no one to do the yard work I had always handled, and the paper route money was no longer contributing to household expenses. Alex turned out to be an excellent roommate. At 22, he was working as an IT support specialist for a local company, while taking night classes in network security. We shared not just an apartment, but a vision of building careers in technology without traditional 4-year degrees. He became both friend and informal mentor, helping me navigate independent adult life. The first component of my new PC build was the processor. Not top of the line this time, but a solid mid-range model that would handle development work. I set it on my dresser in its box, a tangible symbol of my fresh start. Over the next 4 months, I added components one by one: motherboard, memory, storage case, power supply. Each purchase was a small victory properly earned and securely mine. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my community college courses in computer science. The material came naturally to me, and my practical experience at Tech World gave me advantages over classmates who had only theoretical knowledge. By the end of the first semester, I had caught the attention of several professors who encouraged me to join coding competitions and special projects. 6 months after moving out, I had a complete PC setup. Not exactly what I had originally planned, but actually better in some ways, because I had learned so much more about component selection through my work. The night I completed the build and saw the system post successfully was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. With a proper development environment finally established, I began working on an app idea that had been percolating in my mind for months. It was a tool to help small businesses manage inventory and point-of-sale operations more efficiently than existing options, inspired by problems I had observed at Tech World. I coded in the evenings after work and on weekends, occasionally bouncing ideas off Alex, who provided valuable feedback from a user experience perspective. 9 months into my independent life, something unexpected happened. A customer at Tech World, the owner of a local tech startup, overheard me explaining complex networking concepts to another customer. Impressed, he left his business card and invited me to interview for a junior developer position. The salary offered was nearly twice what I was making as assistant manager, with tuition assistance for continuing education. I took the job and immersed myself in the startup environment. The work was challenging but exhilarating, allowing me to learn from experienced developers while contributing meaningfully to projects. The company culture valued skill and results over credentials, giving me opportunities that might have been closed to me in more traditional corporate environments. My apartment situation improved as well. With my increased income, Alex and I moved to a better 2-bedroom place closer to my new job. I purchased proper furniture, set up a dedicated home office space, and began to feel truly established in my independent life. Occasionally, family members would reach out. My mother's messages became less frequent, but more desperate, often mentioning financial difficulties. Reading between the lines, it seemed my parents' credit card debt had become unmanageable. Julia had returned from France and was now demanding a graduation trip to Italy the following year, apparently oblivious to the family's financial reality. Around the 1-year mark of my departure, the messages took on a new tone. My mother mentioned my father's reduced hours at work and unexpected expenses that were making it difficult to make mortgage payments. There were vague references to possibly needing to ask family for help, the first indirect attempt to see if I would offer financial assistance. I maintained polite but distant communication, never volunteering information about my improving financial situation. When direct requests for loans finally came, I responded with brief wishes for their situation to improve, but made no offers of help. Part of me felt guilty, but a stronger part remembered all too clearly how they had treated me when I was vulnerable. 18 months after leaving home, I received a promotion to mid-level developer with another substantial salary increase. My app project had progressed to beta testing, with several local businesses providing feedback. Alex had introduced me to his company's marketing director, who saw potential in the product and offered to help with launch strategy. By the 2-year mark, I had paid off my modest student loans from community college and was taking additional specialized courses online. My app had launched in the regional market, with growing success, generating side income that I reinvested in development tools and additional features. I moved to my own 1-bedroom apartment, maintaining friendship with Alex, but enjoying the newfound privacy. The most surprising development came when a larger tech company expressed interest in acquiring my app. After lengthy negotiations with a lawyer I hired, I agreed to sell it for a sum that, while not life-changing, represented more money than I had ever had at once. I used the proceeds to make a down payment on a small condo, establishing more permanent roots in my independent life. Throughout this period of growth, my family's situation appeared to be moving in the opposite direction. Through occasional messages and information from extended family, I learned that my parents had been forced to refinance their home again, and that Julia had dropped out of college after 2 semesters, claiming it wasn't the right environment for her. She had moved back home and was working part-time at a retail store, apparently struggling to adjust to a world that didn't cater to her every whim. 3 years after my departure, the call I had been half expecting finally came. My mother's voice sounded tired and defeated, as she explained that they were 3 months behind on mortgage payments and facing possible foreclosure. Julia's car had been repossessed, and multiple credit cards were in collection. Would I be willing to meet and discuss family matters? After some consideration, I agreed to a meeting, not out of obligation, but curiosity. The time had come to close this chapter properly, on my terms. I drove to my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon, parking my modest but well-maintained car in the driveway. The property showed signs of neglect: overgrown landscaping, peeling paint, a broken shutter hanging askew. It was a physical manifestation of the financial deterioration I'd gathered from my mother's increasingly desperate messages. My mother answered the door, looking noticeably older than when I'd left 3 years earlier. She hugged me awkwardly, and I returned the gesture with restraint. My father waited in the living room, pride, visibly battling with desperation on his face. The house smelled musty, as if windows hadn't been opened in months. Julia emerged from the kitchen, the biggest surprise of all. Gone were the designer clothes and carefully maintained appearance. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, her outfit plain and slightly worn. The entitled princess had been replaced by someone who looked ordinary. She nodded at me without meeting my eyes. A far cry from the confident, demanding sister I remembered. "Cooper, thank you for coming." My mother began gesturing for me to sit. "We've been going through a difficult time, and we needed to talk to you." My father cleared his throat. "I'll get straight to the point. We're in financial trouble. Serious trouble. The bank is threatening foreclosure, and we've exhausted all other options." I nodded, waiting for him to continue rather than filling the uncomfortable silence. "I lost my management position last year," he explained, the admission clearly painful. "I'm still at the company, but at a significantly reduced salary. Between that, the medical bills from your mother's back surgery, and some poor financial decisions, we're drowning. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage," my mother added. "And the credit cards are, well, they're beyond manageable at this point." I looked around the room, noting the absence of the luxury items that had once been scattered throughout the house. "And Julia's situation?" I asked, looking directly at my sister for the first time. She shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't finish college. It wasn't working out. I'm at the mall now in retail. Part-time, mostly." "Cooper," my father said, leaning forward. "I know we've had our differences, but we need help. We're family despite everything. We're asking if you could help us with enough to stop the foreclosure process, just to get back on our feet." Rather than responding immediately, I reached into my messenger bag and removed a folder. "Before I answer, that I'd like to show you something." From the folder, I extracted copies of the financial documents I'd discovered years ago, their credit card statements, the depleted college account with my name on it, the second mortgage paperwork. Alongside these, I placed more recent documents, my bank statements, showing steady financial growth, property tax records, for my condo and investment account summaries. "This is where I started," I said, pointing to the old documents. "With nothing because you took it all. And this," I continued, indicating my current financial records, "is where I am now. I built this from zero, with no help from anyone but myself." My father's face flushed with anger, but my mother placed a restraining hand on his arm. Julia stared at the papers, something like realization dawning on her face. "I didn't come here to gloat," I clarified. "I came to understand whether anything has actually changed. Because from what I can see, you're in this situation for exactly the same reason you took my computer money 3 years ago. An inability to set boundaries and live within your means." "That's not fair," my father began, but I cut him off. "Isn't it Julia's trip to France? her sweet 16 party, the car, the designer clothes. All those things were prioritized over my education fund, over basic financial security, over my needs and goals. You didn't have the money then, and you certainly don't have it now. The only difference is that I'm no longer here to steal from. A heavy silence fell over the room. Then, surprisingly, it was Julia who broke it. He's right, she said quietly. You guys gave me everything I asked for even when we couldn't afford it. You never said no to me. And then you took from Cooper when the bills came due. My parents looked at her in shock, clearly unaccustomed to this new, self-aware version of their daughter. I turned to my father. I'll be honest. My first instinct was to walk away and let you face the consequences of your choices. But that would make me like you. And I've worked too hard to be better than that. I removed another document from my folder, a proposal I had prepared with the help of a financial advisor. I'm willing to help under very specific conditions. First, you all meet with a credit counselor, one I select and pay for. Second, Julia gets a full-time job, not just part-time hours. Third, you sell this house and downsize to something actually within your means. My father began to protest, but I continued. I'm not giving you money directly. Instead, I'll pay for the credit counseling services and contribute to a debt management plan they establish, but only matching what you pay yourselves. This isn't a bailout. It's a potential path forward if you're actually willing to change. My mother wiped away tears. You've thought this through. I've had 3 years to think about it, I replied. 3 years of building something for myself, while wondering if you were learning anything from what happened. My father's pride warred visibly with desperation. These conditions are humiliating. More humiliating than stealing from your son. More humiliating than facing foreclosure. This isn't about humiliation, Dad. It's about finally facing reality. After further discussion filled with rationalizations from my father and tearful apologies from my mother, they reluctantly agreed to my terms. Julia remained mostly silent, occasionally nodding in agreement with my points, a surreal role reversal from our childhood dynamic. As I prepared to leave, Julia walked me to my car. I didn't understand back then, she said. How they were using you to fund my life. I was so wrapped up in my own world that I didn't see what was happening. And now, I asked. Now I'm 21 with no degree, no skills, and a repossessed car on my credit report, she said with a bitter laugh. Reality has a way of catching up. Over the following months, my conditions were met with varying degrees of compliance. My parents did meet with the credit counselor, though my father resisted many of the recommended changes. They listed the house for sale, eventually accepting an offer that barely covered the remaining mortgage. Julia found full-time work at a different retail location with slightly better pay and showed surprising dedication to establishing her independence. I maintained appropriate boundaries throughout the process, providing the agreed-upon financial support for debt management, but refusing additional requests. It wasn't about punishment but accountability, concepts that had been sorely lacking in our family dynamic. My own life continued to flourish. My career advanced steadily. My investments grew modestly, but consistently, and I began dating someone who respected my independence and ambition. The contrast between my current stability and my family's situation wasn't lost on me, but it brought no satisfaction, only a certain sadness for what might have been if different choices had been made. 6 months after our meeting, my parents moved into a 2-bedroom apartment, more aligned with their actual financial capacity. My father eventually found a new job with better prospects, and my mother took a part-time position to contribute to their recovery. Julia moved into a shared apartment with co-workers, beginning her own journey toward genuine independence. Our relationship remained complicated. We weren't close, and perhaps never would be, but we had established a new dynamic, based on reality, rather than exploitation. The most significant change was in how they treated me. with a respect born from the undeniable evidence that I had succeeded despite not because of their parenting. Looking back on the journey from that betrayed 17-year-old to the successful adult I had become, I realized that the computer incident, painful as it was, had ultimately forced me into self-reliance far earlier than most people. That premature independence had accelerated my growth in ways that might never have happened otherwise. The true healing came not from confrontation, or even their eventual acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but from the life I had built for myself, one based on honest work, careful planning, and genuine self-respect. I had broken the cycle of financial dysfunction that had defined my family, creating instead a foundation of stability and integrity. The greatest lesson wasn't about revenge or even justice, but about boundaries, having the courage to establish them and the strength to maintain them, even with family. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for others is refuse to enable their destructive patterns. For those watching who might recognize similar patterns in their own families, know this: your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by the person you choose to become despite that treatment. Financial abuse within families is rarely discussed but devastatingly common. Breaking free requires courage, but the freedom on the other side is worth every difficult step. Building a life on your own terms isn't easy, but it's infinitely more satisfying than living at the mercy of others' choices. My journey from betrayal to independence wasn't what I would have chosen, but it led me to a strength I might never have discovered otherwise. Have you experienced similar family dynamics or financial disparities? Share your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more real-life experiences about overcoming family challenges. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the family you build for yourself is more supportive than the one you were born into.